Hello and welcome to another session of Flutter Puzzle Hack Homepage Q&A from Flutter community. My name is Simon Lightfoot, together with Scott. Hi, Scott. You look a little bit different.
I do look a little bit different. You look a little bit different too, Simon.
Yeah, I do. I know. So everyone is changing, right? We
Yep.
are changing too. No, just a joke. So together with the staff, my name is Majid, and we're from Flutter community. We're trying to cover Scott and Simon. They both couldn't make it for this session, so I hope that we can cover them very well. I think, Steph, we should start the program. I think a lot of people are waiting for our amazing guest, and they are actually waiting for the question get answered, right? Let's go through our slides first. So, Steph, do you want to talk about it?
Sure. So we have some do's and don'ts within the Flutter community. You need to be nice and respectful. This is within your comments and Twitter too. During the YouTube live chat, social media, all of that, don't post anything that is adult content, rude, or offensive. Don't advertise or promote anything. If you do, you're going to get kicked out. Don't spam. If you post questions, don't keep doing it because we just won't answer your question. Harassment of any kind is not tolerated within the Flutter community at all. The thing is, we all talk, we all know each other. So if you do something here, you're going to get kicked out of other communities as well. And that includes the world. So just be nice. That's basically what we're asking you to do. And if you can't do that, go away.
Fantastic. So let's introduce today's host and guest. As I said, my name is Majid, community leader on Flutter.gd, together with the staff, Flutteristas co-leader and Flutter tech editor. We have Kelvin, product marketing manager. We have Frank Puff, Firebase Engineer, and Randall, as always. So let me actually bring up our faces, maybe remove this and introduce Kelvin to the stage. Hello, Kelvin. How's it going?
Hi, Kelvin.
Hi, Steph. Hi, Majid. Thanks so much for having us on today. Really happy to be here and really grateful for everyone that's tuned in live to catch the final info session for the Flutter Puzzle Hack. I'm talking about how to add Firebase to your projects, how to take your projects to that next level, add some cool new functionality. So yeah, I'm really excited to be chatting about that. Quick note on the puzzle hack, just for those who might not be aware of what the puzzle hack is. It's a chance for anyone to build something really fun, unique, from a really basic kind of utilitarian casual game. So to see just how far your creativity lets you go, whether you're implementing multiplayer mode, some sort of crazy hacker mode. We've seen some really cool submissions so far, and over 5,000 participants from over 150 countries. It's kind of wild just to see the kind of the participation rate and how involved folks are. We're planning to announce our final list of judges early next week. So make sure to get your questions in today. And make sure to get started on those submissions. February 28th, I think that's 12 or so days away, is the final day to submit. But like I said,
and it's not too late, right? You can still still start, because I will admit my day job has been really consuming me. I signed up, haven't started. So I still have to go through the
totally great.
And I got to go back, watch the YouTube videos that are here on the Flutter community, as well as see what I can come up with. So if you're watching and you haven't started, you're not alone.
Yes.
Exactly. So head on over to flutterhack.devpost.com. Check out the resources tab. Check out the contest schedule if you want to check out some of the former live streams for tips on adding animations with Rive, or just basics of how to build the puzzle. that VGV helped us present a few weeks ago, anything like that. And you can feel free to get started whenever. It's not too late at all. Make sure to join the Flutter community Slack channel to get any kind of questions you have entered there, or throw them up on the discussion forum on the dev post contest page, where they'll actually get forwarded to the Flutter team. But getting back to today's topic, we're going to be talking about how to add Firebase to your Flutter project. And for that, I'm really excited to introduce Frank van Puffelen, who is a developer relations engineer on the Firebase team. So welcome to the stream, Frank.
All right, let's have Puff. You are muted.
Oh, Puff, you're muted. Oh no.
You're muted.
It happens once a week, and I guess this week it's your turn. Hey everyone, good whatever part of the day it is, but for most of us it's still Wednesday, at least that's what I saw. I'm joined today by Dash, of course, because how can you do anything with Flutter and not use Dash, and Sparky, the unofficial Firebase mascot. I'm so excited to be here today.
Very nice, very nice. So I guess now we can leave the stage to Puff, and you tell us what you have for us, Puff. Good luck.
That sounds great, folks. That sounds great.
Thanks so much, Puff.
See ya.
Now, if all goes well, then we'll also see some slides. Yes, it's magic, people. It's magic. I love this. Okay, so good to be here today. Thank you all for joining. Like Steph, I haven't done too much in the Flutter puzzle hack myself, but I've heard from Kelvin about all the cool submissions he's seen, and it's been amazing what everyone has been building. And I'm here today to, do a bit of like weird marketing, hence the title of this talk, Turn Your Game into an App Success. Honestly, we're going to do a bit of mix here. We're going to look at some of the things that Firebase can help you add to your app to make it successful. We're going to look at some use cases that you could implement on top of the puzzle game that we have to make it a more fun multi-user experience. It's weird. I'm still so used to being in front of a live audience where I can ask for a thumbs up, and I can do that here, but I'm probably not going to see them. But if you have any questions, post them in the comments, and I think they will post them to me later. Please, only easy questions today, if you can help me. Okay, let's see. So I'm Frank or Puff. I respond to both equally, so you hear both. And I'm an engineer on Firebase at Google. And all of you have been working on a puzzle hack so far, right? So if all went well, then you've built this amazing app, right? You've taken the basic puzzle game, you've added all kinds of fun features to it. And I'm not sure how it is for you, but when I do something like that, I get so proud, and I show it to my wife, I show it to my friends, and then I want to upload it to the App and Play Store, right? And I'm like, this is going to be so great. Everyone's going to love it. And yeah, some people do, but some people don't, right? And what turns out is that people really care about a great experience with your app. They don't just care about the feature when it works, they care that it should work always, right? So if your app is buggy or unstable, you're going to get negative reviews. That's not great, right? And this is not just your and my experience. This actually happens for all of us. I'm really sorry. Some weird alarm is going off here. This happens for all of us. We have data to back this up. So over 60% of the people who uninstall apps do that after a bad experience, like a crash or some freezes. And keep in mind, these people don't just stop using your app themselves. They either tell their friends and family, or they write a negative App Store review, and that hurts, right, your adoption. So how can you stop that from happening? Well, it's easy, right? You gotta catch all bugs before you ship the app. It's like, good, we're done, right? We can hang up and start hacking again. Yeah, it's not always easy, right? Like for one, we just overlook things, right? We have our own way of clicking in the app, and other users click in a different order, and that might cause problems. Or you might have issues that don't appear on your test device, even if you have two test devices, right? Your users and your devices are going to be different. So some issues are only going to appear when you give the app to your real users. So how can you then fix it? Well, the thing is that you want to catch these problems early on, right? When the first user hits an issue, you want to get notified about that. And how can you do that? Well, that's where Firebase comes in. We have a product called Crashlytics. And it helps you identify and diagnose crashes in Android and iOS apps with detailed logs that help you figure out what is broken. Crashlytics is installed on, it says here, over 3 billion devices. By now, it's actually well over 5 billion devices. Honestly, any capable mobile phone runs Crashlytics. And every time a crash occurs in one of those apps, it gets sent to our servers. And we use that to generate unique insights into how the crashes may be affecting your users and what the most important crashes are that are happening. You add Crashlytics to your app by installing an SDK. And once you do that and crashes start appearing, you get access to Crashlytics information in the Firebase console. And this is that information. So this is a dashboard where we show you the most important crashes. Now, the most important thing that you see is the crash-free users statistics. And this means that over 98% of our users are currently not experiencing any crashes. Maybe even more important, the line is going up. So that's a good thing, right? But we show you more information. For example, this is a list of the top crashes that your users are experiencing. So we take all the crashes and we group them by similarity, and then we order it so that you can know what's affecting most of your users. And then for each of these crashes, we show you what we can find out about it. For example, this first crash only happens on iOS 11. That might be important to you. We also have general insights about what might be causing this crash, and we show that too. So by using this dashboard, you can quickly see which crashes your users are seeing and which ones are most important for you to fix. Then when you click on one of the crashes, we give you a detailed view of that crash. At the bottom of this screen, you see a stack trace. So you can see on which line the problem is happening. And at the top, you can see which versions are affected by this, right? So you can see whether you introduced it in a specific version. We also show you things about, if you're using our free analytics product, we show sort of like a breadcrumb of the things the user was doing leading up to the crash, which might make it easier for you to reproduce it. So you get detailed information that allows you to fix the crashes quickly and push out the update to your users to get rid of those negative reviews. Okay, I said Firebase once. Let's fix that and say it more. So Firebase is not just Crashlytics. We have 18 or so products that help you solve key problems during the app lifecycle. And Crashlytics is one of them. But yeah, crashes are not the only thing that might be a quality problem, right? Sluggish apps are also a problem. And sure, Flutter helps us build great, smooth apps, but there's still many things we can do wrong. So for that, you can use performance monitoring. We also have TestLab, which honestly, if you have 2 devices, TestLab has 200 of them. You can run automated tests on those before you ship the app to your users. We have app distribution because if you have enough users, you probably have a select group of more trusted users that you want to send pre-releases of your app to. Now you see that this is one very narrow vertical pillar because we have more features. For example, we have a set of features that help you build better apps. But we'll get to those in a moment because we're going to look at some fun use cases. Quickly want to look at some of the features that we have that help you drive user engagement. So these are the features that you typically don't think of straight away when you start building your app. But once you have the app in the hands of your users, you're like, how can I keep them coming back to my app? One of the first things you want to look at there is a product called cloud messaging. Because imagine that you add a multi-user feature to your app to, say, a message board. And this is not really imaginary. We're going to do that in a bit, right? Then when somebody mentions another user on the message board, yeah, you probably want the other user to get notified of that. But what are the chances of them at that moment playing the game? Right? Yeah, not very big. So what you want to do there is send a push notification that shows up on their device even when they're not using the app. Then when they click on that, they get re-engaged into your app. So this is called re-engagement, and it's one of the features in Firebase. So you can send a message from your server to all kinds of clients, right? To all the users of your app. And this is a free and unlimited product of Firebase. We send billions and billions of messages every day. It's called cloud messaging, Firebase Cloud Messaging, or FCM normally. It's a free service to send messages from servers to all the connected apps. As I said, we send billions and billions of messages every day. So this is not a big concern. What you can do is, in your application, send a message to all of your users. Now, just like Flutter, Firebase is cross-platform. And that means that you can send messages to iOS, Android, and web users. In fact, with a single call, you can send a message to all of these different devices. So you don't have to worry about what type of device the user is on. But of course, if you want to give a very specific experience to the iOS users, you can customize the message for them. Okay, one feature. We've now covered 2 products. Let's have a look at another few things in user engagement. For example, I'm not going to show you much about it, but Firebase is integrated with Google Analytics. That means that you get free, unlimited analytics. So for all of your users, you can just send events and start seeing how users are using your app. And you look in the dashboard and you can see what's the retention rate, right? The retention graph look like. If people stop using the application, what screen were they in, right? Was there a specific puzzle that didn't work for them? These types of things are really key about using analytics. But another thing I want to look at today is the feature called remote config, which allows you to change the app behavior without releasing a new version. Changing app behavior is a common thing we want to do, right? For example, let's say we want to change the background color of the app. It's a little tweak, right? Let's say that text we have at the top, it's now called store, but maybe there's some other text that would work better. Right? And yeah, we think people are actually having a hard time, so we might want to make the game a bit simpler. Right? All of these are changes that require us to make a new build of the application and then send it to the App Store and Play Store, wait for the review, then wait for the users to download it. And it's like, this takes a lot of time if you have to do this for every small change. But that's where Firebase Remote Config comes in. Firebase Remote Config is really just a key value store that lives in the cloud that your application can pull values from and then use them to tweak the app behavior. We can do that without needing to publish a new version of the app to the App or Play Store. And here's how it works. So here we have some default values that we ship in the binary of the application as we build it. So we have 3 properties: button text, Kraken state, and C level. They're apparently important to our game here. Now, we ship default values for these in the application, but then we can modify them through the Firebase console or through an API. And when we modify them, the app will get the new versions when it starts. So every time the app starts, it checks with the server, what values do we have for these? And if any value is different, it overrides the local value with the value from the server. So now we can tweak the behavior of the app based on something we do after it's been released. So remote config merges the values that you hard-coded with the values that come from the cloud, and then it shows the user, or it gives your app the resulting values. Even better, remote config lets you deliver different values to different users. This is key to building an exciting app experience. For example, let's say that you want to give your Canadian users a different treatment because you want to celebrate Canada Day with them. So I'm not sure if you can see it here, but on the shield that Sparky holds, there's a maple leaf. Like, wouldn't that be fun to do? But honestly, only your Canadian users are going to be like excited about that, right? It's a little Easter egg that really works for them. So with Firebase, you can say, okay, I want only my Canadian users to show this image. Right? All the other users see the default experience, but the Canadian users see the maple leaf. This is awesome. You can do this for any country. You can do this for all kinds of values. Thus, you can give a special treatment to groups of users. And talking about groups of users, how often when you add a new feature to your app, are you 100% certain that's going to work for everyone? Right? That's scary if you have an app with thousands or millions of users. So what you can do with remote config is add feature flags. So you build the entire feature, but you put it behind a feature flag, which is just the value you store in remote config. And then you tell remote config, I want to roll out this feature to only a small percentage of the audience. So use them for testing. You check if everything works and if they like the feature. And only once they do, you tell to remote config, okay, now show it to everyone. Remember, this doesn't require any new versions to be published, right? We're not doing new releases. We can just control this from the Firebase console. So if it turns out that the feature does not work, not even for the test users, we can remove it for everyone without a new release. Then we can look at the code, right? What mistakes did we make? More features. We can also use analytics events to tweak the behavior that the user sees. So for example, you can see, right, if you have an in-app purchase for your app, you can use that to tweak the behavior for those users. And this allows you to deliver a customized experience based on your user preferences and their behavior, all from the Firebase console. If you've done development, you might have heard of A/B testing, right? It's where you give 2 variants that you're not sure which one will perform better. You show both of them to a different group of users, and then you test, right, which one works better. You typically have a control group that gets the default experience. Firebase has A/B testing built in too. So you tell us the values for the remote config parameters, and we'll run a test on them. And relatively new, we now even have on-device personalization. That means that you tell us about the parameters. You tell us, I don't know what the right values are. Can you help me optimize this? And remote config will run machine learning experiments on the user's device to make sure they get the best experience for their behavior and preferences. Just one more product that we covered. So these are some user engagement products. Remember, cloud messaging allows you to pull the user back in to the app when something interesting happens while they're not using the application. And remote config allows you to tweak the app behavior without publishing a new version. That leaves one more pillar that we haven't covered yet, right? Which is how to build better apps. And honestly, this is where a lot of you will start using Firebase. It's where I got started. I'm not sure if you noticed something today about when I talked about integrating Firebase, but usually when I used to start building an app, I started with an architecture like this. This is a traditional 3-tier architecture, where on the one side, we have the devices where we have our Flutter app running. And on the far other side, we have a database or other backend services that we want to use. And then in the middle, we put a server, right? And on the server, we create these custom endpoints, and we write code that takes the request from the device and then queries the database and gives the result back, right? And that code handles all kinds of business logic, and it handles all kinds of security that we want, right? Authorization, handles all of that. With Firebase, things are different because we take away the server. Because honestly, our users don't really care that much about server code that we write. They don't really care about the beautiful databases that we have. They care about the features that you add to your app, right? So with Firebase, we deliver client-side SDKs that you can use directly in your application. So if you use Firebase in your Flutter app, all you're going to be writing is Dart code. And so far, that might have made sense, right? Sure, crashes we can handle generically, right? Push notifications, sure, yeah, it's system-level functionality. I get that. But with Firebase, we do the same for what you probably consider the more core services of your app. So Firebase comes with 2 cloud-hosted databases that you can access directly from within your Flutter application. We'll see how to do that in a moment. But we also have pure client-side sign-in. If you've ever spun up an OAuth server, as I have, I'm so happy that I never have to do that again, right? And that is great because once the user is signed in, we can protect data access for those users. Okay. There's file storage and there's other features that are key for you when you're building your application. So you can focus on the features that your users are going to love instead of worrying about spinning up servers or thinking about how to make things scalable and secure them. We'll take care of that and you can focus on the features. Okay, let's have a look at the databases for a moment because we're going to build some features together. And remember, all of the Firebase products come with a Flutter SDK so that you can access them directly from within your Dart code without having to spin up servers. This should look familiar by now. This is the puzzle game. I think that for some of you, it will look more interesting than it does here right now. Okay, let's see. Let's make this multi-user. So we now have 4 users looking at the puzzle game. What can we do here, right? What would be a cool multi-user feature? Showing everyone how somebody is playing the puzzle is probably not the best multi-user feature. It's actually going to be quite complex to do. And honestly, Twitch probably does it better. So that's not a great feature. But a fun first feature to add would be to add a leaderboard, right? Where we can see the top scores for some of our users. So let's see how we're going to do that. And actually, let's first look at the result. So we have an animation here. It already started playing, where we have the top players. This is a looping animation, so we'll give it a few moments to loop. Okay, so we click on the leaderboard. We see that there's no top players yet. And then Gianna has their first score. And then Beth comes in and has a better score. Now Duncan has a score. And then Eve comes in. And Eve actually just bested her own best score. Now, honestly, these are a bit fast. I replayed everything a bit faster. But this would be an interesting feature to add, right? Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing we need is that we need a place to store those scores. And since it's multi-user, we need to make sure that it's a database that all of us can see. So we're going to use a cloud-hosted database for that. Firebase has 2 cloud-hosted databases, Cloud Firestore and the Firebase Runtime database. They're both NoSQL databases, and honestly, for the purposes of what we're doing here today, they're both totally fine. I happen to use the Firebase Runtime database, but if you pick Cloud Firestore, it will work almost the same. Okay. The Firebase Runtime database is a cloud-hosted NoSQL database. We're really just storing a JSON tree in the cloud. So we have a set of key values. And you see at the top here that we have a leaderboard. Then under that, we have 3 keys, and you might recognize them because these are player names. And then for each key, we have a value. That value is the minimum number of moves that the player had. A minimum number, by the way, because this is one game where having a lower score is better, right? Okay. You can see that we use the player name as the key. That immediately means that each player can have only one score in this scenario, which is good because we only want to see their best score. We don't want to show all scores, we just want to show the best score for each player. And once we store this in the database, we can read this leaderboard data into the app and display it to the user. And that's what we just saw, right? Okay, let's switch over to the Firebase console and see what it looks like here. So here you see that we have the Firebase console with the real-time database selected. On the right, you see that we have a node called leaderboard, just like in the slide before. And here you can see that the players are posting their scores. And you can see that they're modifying their scores. So every time a new player posts their score, you see a green node pop up. And every time they're improving their score, so having a lower number of moves, you can see that it shows up in yellow. So Abe just scored for the first time, Jules scored, Gianna. I think one of them was besting their own score, right? Yes, Jules improved their score now. Okay. Let's see how we write this data from Firebase. Now I have a link at the end to a talk where I show you exactly how to wire Firebase up. But for here, I'm just going to look at the code that writes the score to the database. These are the 4 lines that we need. It's a single statement, actually. The first line is Firebase database.instance, and that creates a connection to the Firebase database. In another part of the code, we've initialized Firebase with configuration values that allow our code to find the project on the server. So here, what we do is we find that same database on the server. Then we create what's called a reference to the leaderboard node. Remember, that's where we are storing the score data. Then a child for our username. In this case, I've hard-coded that to be Gianna, but right, you're going to probably use the player name that was entered there. And then we set that value to whatever score we want. You can see that that's a number because we want to store these as numeric values. So just these 4 lines of code write to the Firebase database. And check all the things we did not have to do here, right? We are not checking whether we have an internet connection. We are not checking whether like the database is available. All of that is handled for us automatically by the SDK and by the Firebase backend services. But when we run this code, it's writing the values to the database already. And if you look at what we're seeing here, this sort of looks like the leaderboard we were showing in the app, right? In fact, do you notice that this is constantly updating? So the Firebase console immediately shows any data that comes in. That might be different from what you're used to from other databases, right? Where you need to run a query to get the current scores. In fact, if you think of the leaderboard screen that we had a bit earlier, then you're probably used to, right, when somebody clicks on the leaderboard tab, you're going to run a SQL statement to get the values from the cloud, right? And yeah, that's it, right? You're showing the current top values. And then maybe when somebody like clicks on the leaderboard tab again, you do this again, right? Or if you're really fancy, you're going to do this every few seconds, right? With Firebase, things are different. Firebase has a reactive model for the database. That's why it's called the real-time database. Because this is the database reading model for Firebase. So these are 5 devices that are all connected to the same data, let's say our leaderboard. And every time you see a yellow line, that's one of the devices writing data. And then the blue lines are all the other devices being notified of that updated data. This happens automatically whenever you connect to the database to read data from it. So whenever you first say, I'm interested in the leaderboard data, the database server keeps an open connection to each client. Whenever there's an update to the data, it sends that data to the client almost instantly. Within milliseconds, the scores will be sent out to all other players. That's awesome, right? Let's see how complex this is to wire up in the code. Okay, it's a bit more code than what we saw before, but it's actually not too bad. Because the first line is just, it's a build, right? As we see in all our widgets. So that's fine. Actually, the first interesting bit is happening here. We're using a custom widget called Firebase Animated List. And it's included with the Firebase library. And it somewhat combines a list view with a stream builder and knowledge of Firebase. That's important. So where you normally have a stream in a stream builder, in Firebase Animated List, you have a query. And the query tells Firebase what data you want to read. You can see that we again have Firebase database instance ref leaderboard. That's the same as we had when we were writing. So here we are still accessing the same leaderboard in the cloud. But now we're saying we want to order by the value and get the first 5 results from that. And it's the first 5 because remember, the lowest number of moves is the best score here. Okay. What the Firebase Animated List does, it opens a stream on this. So it internally just is a stream builder again. right? And on that stream, immediately when we run this code, we get an event for the current first 5 values. If there's fewer than 5, we'll get the fewer, of course. And then whenever there's a change, we get a new event with, again, the updated top 5 values. So it opens the stream from the database to the application and immediately updates us whenever there's a new value. Okay. Now, the animated list then has an item builder in there. That gives us the usual things we want, including an animation that we use for showing animation here. But also it gives us a snapshot of a single player score because we're rendering a single item here. So that's in the snapshot parameter here. Then we render that into a list tile. So we take the key, which is the player name, and the value, which is the player score, and we render that into a list tile. That's how we get this. Sure, the code might be a bit unfamiliar, but not too bad, right? It's actually not that much code for creating a leaderboard. Ooh, that's fun. But one thing that you should be wondering about is, how do I keep malicious players from writing a score that they didn't really have? Or even worse, how do I keep players from just deleting my own database, right? Isn't this the same as allowing somebody to enter a SQL statement into your app and then just sending it to the database? And yes, it could be. And unfortunately, on many databases that are not well configured, it will be, right? It's like opening port 1433 for your SQL Server database and saying, come on, give me all your SQL. It's never a good idea. But we do have a layer of protection in front of the database. So we allow you to control exactly what data can be read and written and who can write that data with Firebase's security rules. So these are a layer of protection that sits in front of your database that controls all access to that database. And guess what? You get to write those. So you get to say, it's like, no, nobody can read and write from the root of the database. That's not a thing, right? And you can say things about what's a reasonable score, right? Maybe anything under 50 is not a reasonable score for your sliding puzzle. Or maybe you actually are going to store all the moves that somebody has in the database, the random seed that you use to generate the puzzle, and then you're going to validate all the moves that they've made to make sure that that leads to the score that they claim to have gotten. Now, this might be possible in security rules, or it might not be. But if you store the information, you can more likely catch cheaters. So security rules are the way where you protect data access. Things you would normally do in the server, you now do in security rules. Okay, we have one more use case to look at. Because it's fun to have a leaderboard, but actually one of the most popular features in any app is a message board, like we see over here. Again, this is a loop, so I'm going to wait for it to clear. But this is a message board where we show the 5 most recent messages. And like I said, I'm waiting for it to loop. There we go. So if we click on the message board, we see that it's initially empty, which makes sense. Then as somebody starts typing a message, we see a typing indicator first. And then a few moments later, we see when they hit enter, the message that they send. And now this is fun for players to interact, but it's actually also really good for you to get feature ideas, because do we even have a head-to-head mode in the game? And if not, should we maybe add that? And the message board shows the 5 most recent messages. So you can see here that they're coming in. Now, when more than 5 messages have been posted, the oldest one automatically gets removed. And we'll see that in a bit. We are now at 4. Here's number 5. That's me again, apparently. I have lots of questions about the game. Oh, here I was just bragging about my score. But you can now see when the 6th message appears, the 5th one disappears. And of course, the 5 is something you can control. But it's really great that you have like a sliding window over your number of messages. Okay, let's look at how we're going to implement this one. So we're back in the database, but we're now in a node called chat. You might be able to see that. You can see that initially it's empty. Now, when a user starts typing a message, we see that it shows up in the database, and you see that there's a typing indicator, ... Then a few moments later, you see that the message gets updated again. So we're using 3 dots as the typing indicator. We could do anything with that to visualize it nicer, right? I've been looking at how to do this in like this little animated wave thing or something, all kinds of stuff that you can add to your app. But in the database, all that's important is what's the state that we transfer. So again, you can see that initially the message shows up in green because it's a new message. And then when you post the actual message, when you hit enter, it shows up in yellow briefly because it's a change to an existing message. Okay, let's look at the code for building this. So this is the code for writing the message. And it's a bit more, but mostly because I added more white space. Again, we're calling a Firebase database.instance to get access to the database. Then we're referencing the chat node, which we saw earlier. And then we're calling a method called push. Now, you might be used to using numeric indexes for things like chat messages, right? Essentially an array. And that's a great idea until you start thinking multi-user, scalable, cloud-hosted databases and unreliable internet connections. Then suddenly using numeric indexes are not great, because they mean that we would need to agree on the length of the array in order to be able to add a message to it. So Firebase's push does something different. It generates a key that is essentially a unique ID. It's a globally unique, identifier. It's guaranteed to be unique. It's highly random. And I've circled them in the orange boxes here. So they start with -m and then something else. These look random, but they're actually, the first few characters are essentially based on the timestamp. The rest of it is random. So these can be generated for all users at the same time. They can even be generated when you're offline. And great news, new messages will appear at the end because they start with the end time. Sorry, they start with the current time. Excuse me, I heard some noise here. Okay, so we generate these keys and then we start sending a message to it. So we write the first statement created a message reference, a place in the cloud that we can write to, and then we set our values on it. You can see that we write through two properties. First, we write the player name. Here it's a variable, probably in your case too. And we write 3 dots, because that's the typing indicator that we're using. Then later, when the user hits enter, we write the actual message that they entered. That's all we do, and then we get this. Now you might notice the keys more, right? These very long random keys are push IDs. You can see that, right? First, the message is green because it's new. Then when we call set again, only the message is changed. So you'll notice that while we're setting both the player name and the actual message in the second try, actually the database only notices that only the message has been updated. Okay, let's look at code for reading the same messages. And this should look familiar by now, right? We start with an animated list that has a query that will turn into a stream of database updates. We're referencing the chat node, and here we're limiting it to the last 5. By default, they are ordered by the key. So if we do the last 5, we get the 5 most recent messages. Now keep in mind, this is a stream. So that means that when you add a 6th message, the stream will get a new event with only the 5 most recent ones, not the oldest message. So it's a sliding window over your messages. Okay. This once again gets passed to the item builder, but now the snapshot is the message object that we saw in the database. So that has 2 properties, a name and a message. We get the value of those properties and we show it in the list in the tile. That's it, right? That's placed into our UI. With that, we get the chat box that we have here, right? The message board, sorry. Notice what we didn't do here, right? We didn't connect to a server. We didn't spin up a server. We only had to write code using the Firebase SDK, and it worked for our feature. Okay, time to wrap up. We looked at one feature here specifically, right? For building some fun multi-user use cases, the real-time database. But keep in mind, we have more features that help you build better applications, right? That allow you to focus on features that your users love instead of scalability and security. We'll take care of that. Then we have features that you use to make sure your app is of high quality so that your users are not going to leave negative reviews, right? Things like Crashlytics that we look at, that you just install, and with like a single installation, it starts reporting these crashes back to your users, so that, back to your dashboard, so you can start fixing the ones that affect most of your users. Then we have features like user engagement, like cloud messaging, so that when something interesting happens, when the user is not inside the app, you can notify them of that. And remote config that allows us to tweak the user behavior when they without releasing a new version. Okay, these are all part of Firebase, and honestly, there's a lot that you can use here, but you typically start with the ones for building better apps. If you want to learn more about these, and especially the first steps that I sort of glanced over a bit, which is wiring up the SDK inside of your code, I recommend having a look at the talk that I did at Flutter Vikings 2 weeks ago, where we did this step by step. The entire code for that is also available on GitHub, by the way, and it's the same that you need to do here. So if you see at the bottom, there's a short link for it, bit.ly/vikingfire is, I think, a link to my talk, but definitely also watch Craig's talk. And I recommend, if you watch my talk, watch until the end, because there we have 80 players trying to play a maze game together at the same time. And it's really fun to see what chaos that delivers. Okay, I usually tell people that I can't wait to see what they'll build next. In this case, that is really true. I am very excited about the puzzle hack and all the things that I've already heard that you've been building. I can't wait to see what fun multi-user features you come up with. Now, you probably have some questions. So, Steph, Randall, have you been checking? Are there any questions?
I believe
Yes.
there are.
There are actually many questions right now. So let me, maybe I can remove the slides.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So let's get it started. First question. What is the absolute best way to hide the Firebase sensitive data?
I love this question, for one, because it's my most upvoted answer on Stack Overflow. Because the configuration values that you see when you call Firebase initialize app, or that are in Firebase options if you're using the Flutter CLI, are configuration data. They are not secrets. In fact, if you look at the video of my talk at Flutter Vikings, I show them on screen for a long time. They are not secrets. I'm not worried about you going into my project. These values, while they might be called API keys, not the best name we ever gave them, are actually not secrets. So they are just an identifier for your project on our servers. So they're, in that sense, the same as if you would need to load a file from somewhere on the internet, right? You need to have the URL for that file in your code, because otherwise, how are you going to load the data? These configuration values are the exact same for Firebase. So don't hide them. The best way is really to not spend time on it. What you do want to spend time on is then securing access to the data on the backend. And that's where security rules come in. Right? With security rules, you can prevent people from accessing data that they're not authorized for, or from making changes that are not valid according to your data model. So while Firebase's database are NoSQL databases, schemaless databases, the security rules allow you to validate the data. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but again, in the talk I did at Flutter Vikings, I actually walked through security rules for validating some moves in a maze game from a multiplayer maze game. And I think it's probably a nice visual way to explain that. So I recommend checking that out. But great question.
Fantastic. Next one. Well, maybe a similar one. How can I make Firestore security rule for my users as well as admin panels?
Really good question also. It's for me slightly different because this is one step further, right? It's like, now how do I make those rules? And that's a good question. First thing I always tell people is don't wait making security rules until your app is done. That's a bad idea. It's the same as for any other security model, right? You don't want to glue it on at the end because you're going to overlook all kinds of things. So I tell people to treat your security rules as part of your code because in fact they are. I see them as code. What I normally do is when I start writing an app is I close off my database and like allow nobody access. Then I write the code for my first use case. And guess what? When I run that code, the code is fine, but all access gets rejected because that's what I configured in my database. So then I go into my security rules and I change them so that only the code that I just wrote is now allowed to work. Right? So let's say that we have the leaderboard, right? Or the chat maybe, right? I only want you to be able to add new chat messages. So I still deny reads on the root, but now I allow you to write in the chat messages. But I only allow you to write an individual chat message, right? So one level deeper, you can't just delete the entire chat node or overwrite it. You write one message at a time. And then it's like, cool, what's a valid chat message, right? You probably want the user to be signed in at that point, and you want them to post their user ID with a chat message. So that I can check. You can only write messages as yourself, not impersonate somebody else. So all these things allow you to essentially have very granular, very fine-grained control over what data can be written and who can write it. Then we get to the final part, the admin panel, right? That I have like a three-step approach. I'll be completely honest. Normally, my first admin panel, I just hard code the UID of myself, right? I just log in for the first time in the app, capture my user ID, and then in the root of my database, I say, right, that my user ID can read and write everything. Because I trust me. It's a silly habit I have. And then later, right, you can start saying, it's like, cool, instead of hard coding the admin ID, maybe I give them a custom claim, which is something you can do in Firebase authentication. Or maybe I have a list of people that are admins in my database. And then I start using that in my security rules. But the first one is just a hard-coded UID in my security rules. It works great. So I highly recommend doing that. Great question.
Nice. Another one for you, Paul. Steph, do you want to read it out?
Ooh, I found that calling Firebase Cloud Functions in an isolate is not supported natively. Can I call a function without a wait and just make it work in the background? I must admit, I haven't done this myself, and I also don't know what an isolate within Flutter is. That said, I have a feeling it might be the same as a Kotlin coroutine, or I forget the Swift version of it. But yes, you should be able to do a fire and forget on callable cloud functions. So cloud functions are, for everyone else, are a way to run your code on my servers, I sometimes say. So you can write small snippets of code that you deploy to your Firebase project and then get run in response to things that happen in your Firebase project. For example, we could thinking of one. Oh, right, do sentiment analysis on the chat, right, on the message board, so that when somebody writes a negative message, right, we could do things, right? We could either have them submit it to something we write and then we reject it before it gets posted. But quite often what is good enough is that we reactively flag the message as being negative, right? So we do a review on the messages. We do that, right? We could do it in client-side code, but this is a case where probably you want to run this in a trusted environment, right? Because if you do it in client-side code, then somebody can bypass that code because we gave them the configuration data. So you want to run this on a server, and Cloud Functions is your way to do that. It can run there in response to something being written to the database. Then you take the text that they posted, you pass it through one of those AI things that tells you whether it was positive or negative, called sentiment analysis. And then you write a flag to the message saying, yep, this message is good, or no, this message is a bit negative. We even have extensions where we've pre-built this for you. So a Firebase extension is just a module you plug into your application that, yeah, we've written these cloud functions for you. And it's called Remove Toxicity with, I don't know the partner that we built it with. I'm really sorry to them. But this will do that automatically for you based on Firestore in that case. You should be able to fire these, so callable cloud functions, are a way to then directly call these cloud functions from your application. As far as I know, you should be able to run those without waiting for the results. If not, I would recommend adding an empty then handler to it. That would be my other approach. It's a great question, by the way. If you're having trouble getting this to work, please post it on Stack Overflow so that I can have a look, because I'd love to give this a try. Okay.
All right. Great. So, Steph?
So if you're going to ask a question, make sure you put a Q in front of it, because if you don't, Randall's not going to tag it and share it with us, so we won't be able to find it. So make sure you do that. Now, I have a question. So here's a Q. So if you're storing the user data and you have it in Firebase, you know, there's privacy protection in the EU, California, and things like that. Is there an easy way for a developer to be able to go in and just wipe that data if the user is asking for that, or is it something that the developer has to write? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, I love it, because you do an or question. I'm going to answer with yes and yes, both of them. So, which is totally fine. No, it's a great question, actually. This was one of the first cloud functions we wrote as an example. So there's two parts to this, right? We have APIs that allow that will remove the user data that we store for a user, right? So Firebase authentication is the sign-in product, and guess what? By its nature, it has to store data about the user, right? And that is an API that you can call from within your application already to delete the user data. It's actually quite simple, right? User.delete. So that you can run directly in the app. We also have an admin SDK where you can delete users without them being signed in. So that takes part of the Firebase authentication. And we have similar APIs for other products that store PII, by the way. All of these are well documented. But the thing is, you also store data about the users, right? You probably want to store a bigger user profile than that Firebase authentication does. And we can't clean up the data for you, right? You know the structure that you store it in. So there we've given an example implementation called, I think, remove user data. But it's also an extension where you essentially configure, it's like, hey, here in my database, I store, based on the user ID, I store user-specific data. And that is running as a cloud function, so that when the user gets removed from Firebase authentication, it automatically goes through the database and removes all that user's data. We have a friendly chat application, a sample application, where we actually do that. So we had to modify the application quite a bit to get like the data in a format that would be cleanable like that. So it's a good example of how you should structure your data, right? It means that all data that you have to remove under local law has to be associated with the user, right? And we had a way to have anonymous comments, for example. It's like, yep, can't do that anymore because then I can't clean them up. Right. So yes, this is quite possible, and yes, you will have to do custom work. Both.
Awesome, thank you so very much.
Great questions.
So next question, and I don't. There we go. Can Firebase remote? Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm not even going to attempt the name. Sorry. Can the Firebase remote value store entire JSON files?
Totally fine. The product is called Firebase Remote Config, by the way, but I must admit the name is not always easy. I recently mistyped Firebase remove config, which was like, I asked on Twitter, it's like, what would that product do if it existed? But remote config can store, it's tricky. So the values are treated as atomic, but you can, of course, in a string value, store JSON. And in fact, many of our developers do that for more complex use cases, right? At that point, you will want to consider using the API that we have to push those values. Now, this is not an API that you use in your Flutter app, because it would be really a bad practice if all your users could modify the configuration values for all other users. It would be fun, but not secure. But there is a API that you can call from trusted environments, we call them. So like places where trusted environments is shorthand for your own machine. Right, a very common one, and I run a lot of these scripts there, but also a server you control, or Cloud Functions or Cloud Run, right? Some place where you know that the code that runs is the code that you wrote. And we have an SDK for that called the admin SDK, and you can write values for remote config there. And we have a REST API.
What was the name again? Sorry. What was the SDK?
Yeah, the admin SDK.
The admin,
yeah, for administrative. I really don't like the name.
Sorry, I just didn't get it.
No, they used to be called server SDKs, but then we realized that many of them don't run on servers anymore. So, and we have these for Node is the most common one, but we have them for Java backends, for Go, for there's way more. I need to get better at it. For PHP, for all kinds of languages, at least for Python. Sorry, not PHP. For PHP, there's a third party one. And I'm saying this because you probably, since you're going to be encoding the JSON into a single string, you probably want to do that through an API, not through our console, right? You don't want to be typing all those double quotes. Okay.
Sounds good. There is actually another question related to this. Let me bring this up. And that's about the pricing for Firebase Remote Config.
I'm such a bad salesperson. Because this is a thing I completely forgot. All of the Firebase products, well, most of the Firebase products are completely free. And remote config is one of those. FCM is also one of those. Analytics, same thing. Most Firebase products, even when they're paid, have a generous free tier. So for the real-time database, for example, like when I was doing the Flutter Vikings app, was on the free plan. Or sorry, it was not on the free plan because I needed something that isn't there, Cloud Functions, but it definitely was in the free tier, right? I didn't even come close to having to pay a cent for anything. So remote config is one of those that, honestly, we just want you to be able to build better apps, because when you build better apps, there's going to be more users using them. And I'm trying to think. Crashlytics is completely free and unlimited, for example. And yeah, like I said, the real-time database that I use today has a incredibly generous free tier also. So no reason to not get started with them, I would say. Okay.
All right, good. So I think Kevin wants to share something with us quickly. Kevin?
Yeah. Thanks again, Puff, so much for the awesome presentation, getting so many good questions, which is really awesome. Thanks for everyone that tuned in. I have to get going, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew 12 days left to submit. Head over to flutterhack.devpost.com to get your project going. And it's definitely not too late to start. And I'm really, really excited by what I'm seeing and what I'm sure will be even more great submissions coming in. But thanks again, everyone, for coming in. Thank you again, Puff, Majid, Steph, all for stepping in and presenting and hopping on this live stream today.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Galvin. All right, let's continue, Puff. We have actually a couple of more questions. So this question that I bring it up right now is very, actually, probably well-known question.
And it's a really good question. Honestly, at times I wish we only had one of these, but they both serve different purposes. And as usual, it depends, right? If one of them was better for everything, we wouldn't have the other one, right? It would have been like a product that might still exist, but that we wouldn't promote anymore. And I promote both of them like equally. The difference is in how you use them. So honestly, the two use cases I did today could have run equally on both of them. Like there's not a big difference. But when we did a game for Flutter Vikings, that was a game where we were going to be cooperatively escaping from a maze. And cooperatively here meant when we were doing this at the conference, 80 plus people at the same time modifying a position, like a single like key value pair in the database. Frequently writing to the same location is typically something that the real-time database is better at. Also, it has a lower latency spreading that data out to connected clients in that case. Firestore is typically much better if you have many more reads of larger data. So storing user profiles, honestly, I think for most apps, it works best in both, but typically Firestore would be better there. They're slightly bigger documents and you are going to have many more people reading them. So that's some of the things. Honestly, the best I can say is we have a database recommender in our documentation for both Firestore and the real-time database, and go through that. It asks you key questions. And if you don't know, just try one of them. They both have free tiers. So it's a good way to get started anyway, right?
All right, that's good. So another question here is about, this is actually a question that I also receive quite a lot. So does Firebase support a full-fledged e-commerce or like full-fledged something app, you know?
Yeah. It's the question is broad, unfortunately. It's tricky. Can you build a full-fledged e-commerce app on Firebase? Yes, but you can also build it without Firebase, so it doesn't really matter all that much, right? For e-commerce specifically, we've actually been adding lots of Firebase extensions recently. So we started by integrating with Stripe, so payment processing, which for when you're shipping physical goods, right, is allowed. When you're doing in-app purchases, not, but when you're shipping physical goods, you can use your own payment processing. And we've now been doing things like integrating with a shipping label service. We've integrated all kinds of services so that you can more quickly build a e-commerce app without having to write too much code. So accidentally, Firebase Extensions has turned into our low-code offering. Like, was not how we started it out, but that's what it turned into due to these types of extensions that are incredibly high value for the amount of code that you have to write. Right? Integrating a payment portal is, while it's not as hard as it maybe used to be, or honestly as building your own payment portal, it's non-trivial. And these extensions make it actually quite trivial. It's like an afternoon. So that's the type of thing I would look for. The code I showed you today was always running on the device, but we talked a bit about cloud functions. And that's what you might need for your code when you start integrating your own things like a payment processor, right? So Cloud Functions runs your code on our server. That's the only way you are guaranteed to know that it's your code that's running, right? Because on your device, somebody could take your keys and change the code. And sure, we have app check to make that harder, but it's not a guarantee, right? You want to use app check because you want to reduce abuse, but you don't want to rely on just app check to prevent abuse, right? That's not a good idea. So, and e-commerce, typically you run some of these things on the server, right? The checkout might be an action you run on the server. Cloud Functions is a great way to do that, right? From your Flutter code, you just write the checkout instruction to the database, that triggers the Cloud Function you wrote, and now you know it's your code running on our servers, so it can't have been hacked, and that does all the sensitive calls to the other APIs that you need. You think that answers it, Majid?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Great. So another question, we have two more questions related to Firebase remote config, and it's interesting. It seems like one of the features people today really liked it. So one is if the old values comes from the assets, where is the new value from the Firebase remote config stored?
I am so happy that I was actually using the product to make the use case work recently, because I know a lot more about it now. So initially, the value is only written in the cloud, right? When the app starts, you do a call to fetch updated configuration data. And you can do that blocking when the app starts, but typically you actually don't want to do it blocking. You want to let the app start with the old values. Then the next time it starts, you use the new values. And so you fetch those values, and those are stored in local storage until you then start using them. Firebase actually stores quite a few things in local storage. So if you're using Flutter, right, shared preferences is the wrapper for that. But we do that on all platforms. So we store it in local storage in the browser. It's actually called local storage shared preferences on Android. And we don't store it in we store it in a local database on iOS, I have to think. So we just keep that for you. And then we merge them when you start using the config values. So we take what you had hard-coded, we overlay what we have in the local version, and then we give you the actual value. And keep in mind, this is per user. So the local storage only contains the values you have, right? You don't get something, essentially, if I'm not a Canadian user, I don't get the Canada Day special value, right? But they are stored locally, but only the value that you are using.
Okay, sounds great. So another question, actually, again, related to this one is the versioning for key value per using Firebase remote config. Do you download the whole configuration or just one KVP?
I'm thinking, this is where you see I wasn't reading the script because it was actually in my speaker notes, I realized. It only sends down the changes. I didn't know, and I was like, I saw this somewhere. So it was in the notes that I used from one of the standard decks where we present about this. So it only downloads the delta. In fact, the real-time database does the same thing, by the way. It also does a delta sync, which you could see a bit when we were in the console, right? When we wrote the updated message, we still wrote the player name, but that didn't show in yellow. And that too only does a delta synchronization, and same for remote config. So it only sends you the updated values. Sorry, yes, no, the updated configuration part.
Oh, that's good. So let's move on to another question here for you regarding to Crashlytics and Dart. So Firebase Crashlytics, does it catch Dart try catch, or we need to send it manually?
Yeah, go for it, Majid.
I think I can. You need to, at least last time that I actually used Firebase Crashlytics, it does not automatically catch it. You need to send this report, but it's very simple, just calling one function and send error and a stack trace. That's it.
Yep, exactly.
You can do it actually globally in Flutter. So you have a global, on error, handler. So you can just pass all of the error over there. It's very simple.
Yeah, that's indeed how you should treat it, right? What you're saying is key for me. So in your code, please don't try catch everywhere. Only catch something if you know how to handle the error. If you don't know how to handle the error, let it go, right? Elsa, right? Just let it go, let it bubble up, we say. Because what you want to do for Crashlytics is install a single global error handler that catches all errors, that then calls Crashlytics. So in your code, you should typically only have one or two places where you call Crashlytics, which is also why it's so great, right? Why the value proposition is so good, because you just make one global change and suddenly you see all the problems that your users are experiencing. So definitely, only try catch if you actually can handle the error. If you don't, let it bubble up, and then you have a single global error handler that sends it to Crashlytics. Exactly.
And maybe one more question here. Well, someone is asking how can I use Flutter Firebase machine learning in applications? Like, is there any official plugins available?
Ooh, I hate it when we stop on a question where I don't know the full answer, but that's okay. So Firebase machine learning, it's really, okay, I have to do a bit of a history here. So we used to have a product called Firebase ML Kit, which was machine learning, client-side machine learning, simple APIs for things like text recognition and stuff like that. And that would run on your device. That is now not part of Firebase anymore. It's now Google ML Kit. So it is, as far as I recall, still in the Flutter libraries, though. I don't know why. We probably just didn't get to removing it or moving it to its own place there. Sorry, not removing it. We're definitely not removing it. We're just moving it elsewhere. There is Firebase machine learning, and I actually don't know if that is wrapped in the Flutter Fire libraries. The new Firebase machine learning is really mostly a wrapper around running your own models, pre-trained models that you've created, and downloading them from the cloud and then running them on the device. And yeah, I just don't know if we've wrapped that in Flutter. I honestly don't know. I would recommend, if we didn't, that you post a feature request on the Flutter Fire repo, because we're always looking for what to do there. It's not that we don't have enough that we want to do with it, but right, the community voice on what you think is most important is really key there. So,
as far as I check right now on Firebase, Flutter Fire, actually, there used to be ML Kit and ML Custom, plugins. And also ML model downloader is something that they are working right now on it.
Okay.
It probably is the one that is covering this. But the other two are, like the old one, ML Kit, are depreciated plugins. So
yeah, that makes sense. I expect them to still work because the underlying APIs haven't changed in a while. Yeah, this is something where you would have to ask either if it's about ML kits, you'd probably have to ask the ML Kit team, is my guess. And it's not part of Firebase anymore. Precisely because, yeah, we are covering quite a few more platforms, right? That's what we often see.
All right. Sounds good. So let's have two more questions, I think, left for Firebase for you. This is one of them. So you can take a look at that. It says, what do you think about using the authentication system with ZK snarks? I actually don't know what this is.
I'm literally looking it up, Majid. So ZK snark stands for zero knowledge, succinct, non-interactive argument of knowledge, and it's a cryptographic proof. Honestly, I have no thoughts on this. You can see that I'm reading the acronym from a wiki page. I just don't know anything about this, so I can't comment on this. But if you are trying to integrate it with Firebase and are running into trouble, always post a question on Stack Overflow and we'll have a look. Because, right, and any external authentication system can be used with Firebase, but you will have to write the code that translates, the information you get from that system to Firebase authentication, right? So if you can sign in with, I love the name ZK Snark, right? A ZK Snark provider, then you take what are called claims, the properties of the user, and then you mint a Firebase token and sign into Firebase with that. And that's how Firebase, right? That's one of the reasons we support quite a few providers, but even when we don't support them, you can add your own providers to Firebase authentication and then start securing access to things like the database based on that user.
Very nice. And this is also my question, and someone asked, and probably everyone knows this person. Do you still work for Firebase?
Thanks, Greg. Thanks. I hope my manager doesn't see this because, yes, I do. I very much still do. But we have this rule at Firebase that we are there where developers are. And there's a lot of developers using Flutter now who want to add multi-user to their app, right? Who want to add these cool features without having to spin up their own servers. And that's why you just see me a lot in Flutter now, right? I've been learning about Flutter for a while, and I started doing a few more things and public talks. Honestly, this quarter has been a perfect storm. as in like there's a lot of talks. I look forward to after this week having a few less. As much as I appreciate doing talks, they always take a lot of preparation time also. So, but yeah, no, I love Flutter. We love Flutter. So if you are running into problems with Flutter and Firebase together, always ask questions on my preferred platform is Stack Overflow. I spent a lot of time there, and the Flutter GDE community is also spending time on Stack Overflow in the coming month, answering more questions. So I really look forward to helping as much as I can there, and also learning about more Firebase features there. It's been one of my favorite things of doing these talks, is getting to use more of Firebase and learning more about Flutter at the same time. So.
That's very nice.
Thank you for coming.
I actually said this is last question, but one question came up quick. Do you have still time, Puff, to answer this question?
Go for it.
It's actually a very good question. So someone said, I'm worried about like my app, that being abused because of like the traffic. And is it the best to control this in rules?
Yes, the simple answer is yes. But first thing, good job on being worried about it. Good thing on thinking about it. This is really important, right? We in the past saw so many Firebase databases that were left completely unprotected, and there's nothing we really can do about it, right? It's your configuration that determines who can read and write the data, but it's your users' data that you're exposing. So you definitely want to protect it. You definitely want to control data access, and security rules are the first layer to do that. Right, between security rules where you can have fine-grained control over what data everyone can read and write is one of them. App check is a broad measure of control, making sure that calls that are very clearly not coming from your app get rejected automatically by the system. And then you have some special cases where it's things like if you have trusted values. So if you have these real API keys, like your Stripe API key, you probably don't want to put in your Dart code, right, in the Flutter app, because people will just start hammering your Stripe dashboard with fake transactions, right? If you have secret code, so detecting cheats is probably something you want to do on the server. And sure, simple cases, and honestly, quite a few non-simple cases you can do in security rules, but you might want to do them in cloud functions otherwise, right, or your own backend server. Oh, and things that need to always be on. That's the other one, right? Sending push notifications cannot be done from the device, must be happening on the server. But that's good because the device might turn off, right? And the server does not. The server is always plugged into mains, always has power. So.
It's a very good question. All right. Thank you very much, Puff. It was amazing to have you on this show, I think. Steph, do you agree with me?
Yeah, totally. I love it. I'm going to go back and rewatch it too. And I want to see your Flutter Vikings presentation too, because I haven't been able to do Flutter Vikings either.
I can imagine. We're all busy, right? But I appreciate that when people join. I even more appreciate it when you just start using Firebase and just start playing with it, right? It's honestly, I've been having so much fun just building these little demos. And I'm never kidding when I say I can't wait to see what everyone builds next, right? It's just so much fun to see what everyone comes up with.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you very much then again. And well, we have to wish you a very good day, probably.
Yep, I am getting back to other work.
Good luck then. See you next time. Bye. All right, so amazing. I love Puff. So
I've never met him.
So,
that was awesome.
So energetic, So
yeah.
I wonder as soon as I talk to him, I want to go and do some Firebase stuff immediately.
Exactly.
So okay, I have to do some Firebase things right now.
It's a big paradigm shift for me because my day job, I'm a SQL developer, and so then learning how to do stuff in NoSQL, so try and keep my two sides of my passions without completely conflicted, because I would admit that I have started writing SQL code that wasn't SQL code, it was Dart.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I wonder if Randall is lurking around here.
Yeah, so let's see. Randall, are you ready? Someone is ready. Hello.
I'm lurking around. Lurking around. Yes. I've been behind the scenes all through this show so far because whenever somebody says Q, I say, that's my cue. So I'm putting these in the chat for everybody. We still have 11 questions that I've flagged, so we can probably start working on some of those. I don't know as much about Firebase as Puff does. I don't think anybody knows as much about Firebase as Puff does. But we'll give a few of these just rumors. We'll put the rumors back in there.
I'll stay over here and lurk.
That. Can do that for lurking, right. So
good. So should we get some questions on screen and maybe answer some questions, Randall? So let's have them. Maybe starting with, actually, this one, I think this is the one that you should answer.
Definitely.
I knew it because the original poster definitely knew I knew something about Perl. I think it's because he saw my message a couple of steps ago. So I don't know. I haven't ever considered using Perl instead of Build Runner. I mean, Perl clearly has the text processing superiority that Dart unfortunately probably will never have, because Perl set the standard for Perl regular expressions. I mean, not that we even see that in the name, Perl compatible regular expressions is because it was compatible with Perl, and Perl kept pushing the leading edge and all that. In fact, I mentioned in the chat that I had written a JSON parser, a full JSON parser as a single Perl regular expression. And so it's like a little crazy stuff. But I haven't actually. Can we put other command line things in place of Build Runner for doing builds? I think we can, can't we?
Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
Stumping the Flutter experts, even.
Even as Simon's clone.
Yeah,
you're the pretend Simon and you don't know, so it sounds like we'll have to bring that back up with Simon next week.
Yeah, please come back next week. We do this Wednesday,
definitely.
every Wednesday, so come on back, and I'll probably be back there flagging that question again, and Simon's probably going to have to freak out about whether it's because Perl. I think Perl is just a great translation, just deals with text really, really well. That was his whole intent to begin with. And Perl regular expressions are way wacky out on the bleeding edge constantly. So pretty amazing stuff.
All right. So we have another question here. Sorry, I'm also looking at different places, so sometimes I just miss what you're talking. So another one here. I wish I could have actually asked this when Puff was here, but I think we can answer that right now. So Dart support for Firebase Cloud Function. I guess first of all, there are some possibilities right now. I think there are some packages in Pub, and also there are some efforts by Kevin, I know, and a bunch of other things. But what do you think about it?
I think I haven't been tracking precisely, but I understood about maybe 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, there was some package released. It had like the minimal Docker image to be able to throw an entire installation, including processes for throwing away the compiler in that cloud function, which would be really helpful. I mean, you don't need the whole Flutter SDK in your Docker just to be able to say, I'll respond to this function. So there was some efforts done that about, I'm going to say probably 6 months to a year ago, and it's probably 2 years ago because it's just the way I remember dates now. But I think if you look around for it, if you Google that exact question, you'll probably get an answer.
Exactly. I mean, I know that there are some efforts over there. So different people from the community have done something, and there are some articles probably. You can find some questions, but if you want like this as a feature from Firebase team, perhaps you can raise an issue, or I bet there is already an issue. You just go there, find it, and just upvote it. So they can prioritize, this probably for us as well.
There's probably an issue with 472 votes.
Yeah, definitely. Another question related to Firebase, but I guess this question, let's read it out first. Firebase database order by child method not working on Android after version 9X.
Yeah.
I guess this is something that you should go to Flutter Fire repo right now and report an issue with an exact error, like the problem that you're receiving, and hopefully the team can take a look at that. Have you faced this issue by any chance, any of you?
No.
No.
Yeah, I think the best place to report this is just on Flutter Fire repo. So please go there and just ask this question.
Puff would probably like somebody to post that question on Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
Because he talked about how much he lives on Stack Overflow, and I bet if he doesn't know, I bet he could try and reproduce it and come up with an answer.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's get another question maybe for you, Randall. Then.
Okay, I think
there you go.
Bring it up. No. Oh, yes. So here's the thing. There are some languages that unify the idea of a statement versus an expression. Dart is not one of them. So there are some structures in Dart that do not return a value and would contribute to the expression they appeared in. And if else is definitely one of those. It's not meant to be used in an expression. It's there. We have an equivalent of that, which is question mark colon, the ternary operator. And that will do correctly what you're trying to do here with an if else in the middle of that expression. But you're trying to pass something to body, and you can't pass something to body if it's not an expression.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. So I hope you get your answer. Let's go to another question. Do you like to answer some architecture question, Randall?
Never. I think architecture is a religion, so I don't know how to answer this without getting into the religious arguments for it. It's like Emacs versus VI or Vim going with these days versus code, VS Code. I will say, though, that I learned architecture back in 1981. See, I'm dating myself, but I learned the original Smalltalk image, and in there, they sort of propelled the idea of MVC, model view controller. And I still think of every other architecture that comes along in terms of that. So I'm a little bit biased towards just straight MVC, which really just means for separation of concerns, you have model data, which doesn't talk to the UI. It's basically just sitting there, or maybe it's talking to a database and being mirrored in the database. You have view data, which is just on the guy's screen, on the person's screen. Sorry, I'm going to politically correct there. That typically doesn't do much in the way of model manipulation. What you really have is the intermediary layer is the control layer. And it is talking to both and trying to figure out how to get the data for this view and how to get the view's responses to get back to the data under business rules. And so I think just having three layers in my mind lets me really sort things out very quickly. Now, I've read and watched Riso Coder's DDD practical layering and things like that based on best practices of the day. It's about 2 years old now, though, so it's getting a bit dated. But I really liked the architecture that he had for the various layers, where to put something like RiverPod for controllers, where to put something for wrapped data that's always verified to be accurate, and even introduced me to the idea of using functional programming in Flutter, which has actually changed the way I write code. I'm a heavy fan of option and either in the package FP-Dart. So go check that out, because that means you actually have typed nulls. We're not just working with a one null. We're working with a typed null. You can't send an int of none into a float, or assuming num of none. That's kind of hard to say, without getting an error, a type violation. And so having null is okay once you can type it, once you can actually give it a particular flavor. And I kind of like that. And either is also really great for capturing error messages bubbling up from lower layers. So I now have sort of a principle that I don't have anything above the controller deal with an exception. There's no exceptions in any of my view code, never, because that's the wrong layer to deal with it.
Exactly. I need to also say something here. A few years ago, like I think maybe 3 years ago, Flutter Europe, I had a talk about DDD and like thinking about a strategic part of it and implementing that into Flutter. Many of these architecture, let's say, patterns, sometimes people say, yeah, this is just the backend things, maybe not just for UI. I think then we can actually be inspired from the different architecture patterns, first of all. And secondly, working as an architect in the last 2 years in my career, I have to admit that one thing I learned, and it's a very boring answer that architects usually say, it's that it depends, right? So it actually really depends. It's really hard to just have one remedy for all application. It's impossible to say, does MVV really work for this large application or not? Well, it depends. It might not work, it may work. So there are many different criteria and many different characteristics that you should go through it and face it and then understand whether it's working or not. There's also one more thing, as Randall mentioned, is that many of these patterns are pretty like old, like long. That doesn't mean they are bad. I mean, they are pretty good. But when you search, probably you find out a lot of article about it, or content, and you learn about them. But if you look at if you want to learn more, just try to find also new patterns, like the ones that are not quite long, like 30 years or 40 years, old. Maybe the ones that are like 7 years, 5 years, or something like that. There are some new patterns and architecture that are also working especially in UI application, let's say front-end applications, like more Fluttering case, and it's working very well. So
yeah, I'll have to say that when I was doing Perl websites all the time, I used MVC principles, but only obviously in Perl on server side. So it was the notion of how am I going through my app? What presentations am I making? What views am I making? Where's the controller for this? Where the business logic is? And where's all my database interface stuff? That was my model on the back end. So MVC tended to be helpful even if I was just writing back-end code, which was nice.
Exactly.
I've seen developers use different types of architecture depending on whatever their situation is. So like you said earlier, it depends. I mean, you don't need to put this huge architecture on something really simple. And if you've got this large Flutter application, you need to do what's best for your application. And sometimes it's a trial and error. And like you said, there is lots of documents out there. I mean, I'm sure you could do an internet search and get a gazillion results and still not know, so it's also good. For me personally, I've done trial and error and then looked at resources that I trust and things like that. But yeah, it all just depends on the situation. And like I said, some developer, it's like I've seen developer person use both.
Yeah.
Or, use 3 or, different kinds of architecture. And so that's one thing that I do like about Flutter is you're not stuck with a specific type of architecture. You can do with Dart and Flutter and have what you need for your app.
But with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
The other thing you can argue about and becomes a religion is the architecture, the organization of your files. I have seen so many people get into heated battles about, well, I think it should be a single topic on one thing. So that should have all your views and everything in there. And I've seen other people argue like I do, which is like, I put all my screens in a folder called screens, because I sometimes need to borrow and reuse things as I'm doing that direction. But, Simon and I could arm wrestle on this any day. So
well, I've seen him do that. I mean, I have OCD, so having things in the, and it's when I first learned working in Flutter, I didn't, my voice is going to start going. I didn't have that structure. And then seeing it done, I'm like, oh yes, it made me smile. Just because, you know, having things at least organized that way, and it's just an organization. It isn't even like, you know, I've got a really simple app, right? I don't need super high complexity in it, but just having the different folders made things like it's just the way it was laid out.
Well, you know, the most important thing I think is that when you have something, some functionality you're trying to add, you know where you're going to put it in the folder structure and what layer it's going to be at in your architecture. And you need to have both of those. And the easier you have access to those two things, the quicker you're going to be developing your app.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And yeah, the folder structure is great because, like you said, you may need to reuse something. And I ran into that, right? You know, so I'm working on different things. I'm like, oh, had I done this at the beginning, right? And that was just because I was following a tutorial, you know, following a course, right? And
Right.
it wasn't something that was discussed. Just like testing wasn't in there. And I still need to get my testing stuff. If Jorge's listening, yeah, still not got it done yet.
Nobody watches this show. Don't worry.
Okay.
Well, I saw some BGV
Yeah.
comment there, so I'm not sure which one it is, but just in case.
Right. Right.
Okay. So shall we go to the next question? How does analytics and machine learning conflict the user privacy? Well, this is very, I'm not sure which context you're talking about, like in Flutter, or was it a Firebase question, or it's like a general question?
Well, for one thing, I know that they're all pretty much anonymized. So I don't know that there's a lot of conflict, but I'm not a privacy expert.
Yeah, me neither. So I guess if you are actually, if this question was about Firebase analytics and maybe something there, ask it on a Stack Overflow, probably. Yep. So because Puff is like looking on all questions on Stack Overflow related to Firebase. So definitely he will answer your question. Let's go to another one. When I listen to auth state changes, it seems like it makes multiple calls over 10x, but using a stream builder, the issue does not persist. Okay, that's
puzzling me, only in the sense that listening to auth state changes is a stream. So if you're not using a stream builder with it, I don't understand how you could be using a stream builder to relate to auth state when you're not listening to that stream.
Yeah, that was actually my main
Oh, good. We're on the same page.
yeah, we're on the same page.
Okay.
I guess, well, it's hard to answer this question right now because we need to reproduce it probably and to find out like how you are doing this. But what I can suggest you again is that you try to actually make this like as a repo or something as an example, and then post it on probably Stack Overflow, and also don't forget to add like Firebase and Flutter and stuff like that, the tags. So we will definitely look into that.
What I could guess is that they're listening to auth state changes. No, that wouldn't do it. I was going to say they're listening to auth state changes in a stateful widget. And when you're doing that, when you in your init state call, you say listen to stream. I'm wondering if that's getting run multiple times for multiple widgets or something. And Stream Builder wouldn't do that because it'd be the one widget at the top of your tree that is paying attention to the stream. That might be it, actually. Well, we don't know because you need to be here to ask the rest of the question.
Yes, definitely. I mean, we need to reproduce that, so it's hard to guess. So hopefully,
the only other thing I could say is I have a video out. If you go to my my YouTube channel, and if you just look for Randall Schwartz Stream Builder, where I talk about how people create the stream in the stream builder, and that's not going to work. You need to create it in a stateful variable somewhere. And the reason is that if you create it in the stream builder, then every build that you do, which could be 60 times a second if there's animation, is going to recreate that auth state change stream. And that's horrible. That's a great way to burn all of your free tier. That's pretty much that's it. So don't do that. So yeah, search for Randall Schwartz Stream Builder and you'll see my video on that. And it's gotten like hundreds and hundreds of views because this problem keeps coming up for everybody about Future Builder and Stream Builder. They both have that same issue that you need to pay attention to the documentation for.
Definitely. Okay, another question is about the minimum Android API to use Firebase product. I guess you're right. The minimum is 19. You are right. I actually looked it up on the Firebase documentation right now, and they mentioned it's 19 KitKat. That's good. So, and this one, well, I wish I could have asked this for Puff. So how can I minimize the RAM consumption in Flutter application with Firebase Firestore? Well, I actually use Firestore in many of my projects. I never faced any RAM issue over there. Like it's, are you, the first thing that I can ask after this question is that, are you sure it's Firebase that is like consuming too much RAM, or it might be something else, you know? So do you have any maybe opinion here, Randall or Steph?
I can't offer anything. Sorry.
Oh, it's hard for me to.
Yeah, I haven't faced this problem, so I don't know that what the solutions would be. But I'd be down to Stack Overflow and Googling. That seems to be my my alternate brain. So works nice.
Yeah. So we have 2 more questions just came in.
Yeah.
And
we're getting close to the end of the show, so please get your questions in soon or ask them next week.
Yeah. All right. So when pushing a message, the first message.set was for the typing indicator, and the second message.set to set the actual message. Best way to deal with when the message is not actually sent.
Have something that says nothing got typed after this. So kind of remove the idea that you're typing a message. No?
I'm actually not really sure if I understand the question.
Well, this is for like notifies when you have a chat room and people are like, I'm guessing.
Oh, okay.
And
okay,
so
okay.
like you can see that I'm typing, but then if I stop typing, like I go to a different window or maybe something, right? You have to somehow reset that. So if you have a state in your database for this user is typing, and so you set that initially, and then you just need to pull it back somehow. You need to capture the event. Or one of the things I like to do is in some architectures I've done is I push I'm typing, but with a timestamp on it. And then I have all the client programs ignore it if the timestamp is over 30 seconds old. So that way you don't have to send another message to say I'm not typing anymore. Because what's that really mean? Not typing.
Yeah. I think for the first suggestion that you mentioned, I've done that way as well. Like you can have like another state, particularly when user starts, so you can just change that state until they actually enter. So then you can change that state again, which means you can determine whether user started typing and they're still typing, have they like entered or not, or you can change that state, and based on that you can show different things on the UI. So that's something that I've done previously, but that's kind of like an event you can listen to it constantly and change typing or not typing.
Oh, I want to do the next question, the provider question, if you can pull that up.
Yep, provider.
How to read provider outside the widget tree while doing testing, or must have a mock class for provider and inject this mock. The answer is RiverPod. Stop using provider. RiverPod works well with Dart. It has everything provider had and more because it's the same guy. It's Remy. Remy's a cool guy and he writes really, really, really good code. And so provider needs to be tied to the context tree to do anything. That's how it was built in. It was based on inherited widgets with a nice interface. So of course it has to be like that. RiverPod has its own management for that. And so for tests, especially unit tests in your application of even a Flutter application, in your unit tests, you can basically create essentially a sort of a container that will hold all of your transaction data that the one that was at the top of the Flutter tree was holding instead. And that is incredible for tests. So you can do all sorts of database and business logic rules and test them completely in Dart, never even invoking a widget, never creating a widget. That is so cool. So yeah, stop using provider, go to RiverPod. It's 1.0 now. It's getting a lot of attention. Stop using provider.
Yes, that was actually the only answer.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so I think we have one more question, which I think it's good to bring it up, and then we can maybe afterwards wrap it up.
Yeah, we're getting close. We don't have to go to the full 2 hours.
Yeah. So how can I manage sequential feature calls while maintaining the app performance? I use a feature.wait, but I get skipped frames warning in console.
I answered that in the chat. Feature wait really doesn't cause exceeding the CPU for frame. So I don't think that's your problem. But I think you're probably doing too much on the IO thread. And the only answer to that is write more efficient code. Or, I mean, put the code you're running out on an isolate. Because an isolate can use a different CPU, a different thread in the operating system. Whereas if you're just using things like async await, they can't do that. That's my guess.
Yes. So you just put up another question, Randall. So let's maybe answer that here. There we go. I've opened 2 dialogues and like to close first dialogue, but it's closing second dialogue.
I don't know the answer to that at all.
I can actually guess, but
Okay.
well, it's also important to me right now to see where and how they actually, when you say open the dialogue, like you do it like right away in one screen or like, but I think it's better to just not to answer it because it's just guess. Do you have any idea what could be like causing this issue?
I don't know. The only thing that came to mind was keys. Maybe he's not
Yeah,
using keys properly. And
that
so it's
actually
close.
was
Yeah, go ahead.
my that actually was my thinking as well. So probably not using keys and or maybe wrong keys or something like that.
Post that on Stack Overflow with real code, or go to Discord. A lot of people are working on Discord, and you get instant answers there. But again, bring code because your description is not sufficing for us to be able to answer.
Exactly.
And the advantage to using keys is because then you are definitely identifying which widget you're wanting to close. So
Yeah.
I bet it's no keys.
Yep.
Exactly.
Minos Llaves.
I need to also tell that, like, if you are going to ask question on the Stack Overflow, so you will probably get a lot of good answers in the next few days. And,
Yes.
So GDs and Flutter experts are going to answer a lot of questions on a Stack Overflow. So take a chance and write your question in a Stack Overflow, tag Flutter, and you probably get a good answer.
Yes. Yeah. That's the next 30 days are going to be really interesting on Stack Overflow because we're we're all digging in and doing more than what we used to do. Like that would be possible for me, but I'll see if I can get some more.
Exactly.
You know, I've got 30,000 reputation points now at Stack Overflow, so it's kind of hard to do more.
I have one or two. I can't do anything because my reputation is just because it's like, okay, I can just give up. But my stuff is, I've always been doing SQL.
Yeah, and I
guess when I looked at Flutter and Dart stuff too, but yeah, no, my reputation, I'm just like that.
I don't know what superpowers I've got for 30,000 points, but I'm sure it's like everything, but I don't know how to use most of those superpowers. So I'm sure there's something there. I can vote on things. I can close things. I can do all sorts of edit almost everything. But I don't do a lot of that. I answer questions. That's what I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, well, we have an animation question. So I'm not actually really expert in the animation part, so that's not definitely my territory to answer.
Is this jank of 6 seconds when it's initially launched? We're still having some issues with that. They're still trying to make that bigger and better, I mean. And there are some things you can do now, but it requires sort of pre-rendering some stuff. And if you look for animation on Flutter Dev, you'll see some things you can do to help improve that. Or in Google, actually, probably also Flutter animation, so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll know more about animation over the next few months because I'm working on a project to convert my own, plus doing additional reading. Simon's given me some tasks to read for animation, but I can't answer anything about it right now because I don't know enough.
Right.
Well, this is also again a bit hard to estimate, to guess, because we need to see exactly when this is happening. Like, is it as Randall said, is it a starting point? Is it somewhere in the application? Maybe the animation is not causing the jank, but you have some other task which is just blocking the thread instead. So that's not probably even the animation. So it's very hard without seeing code and like replicating that to understand what the error is.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I guess that's pretty much it. Well, as far as I can see, we covered all the questions. If there is no more questions, then maybe we can talk about the state management at the end and wrap. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, there's that one call or the one question that we could try to answer.
Which one is that?
It's in Stard. Feature API.
Oh, the feature API. I thought that. Didn't we answer this?
We didn't. No, we didn't yet.
We didn't yet. Okay. Well, okay. Let's go for it.
Yeah, we can show how much our ignorance is at this point now. I will tell you though that there are some testing structures about how to pretend that a delay happened or how to evaluate something being called after a delay. But check what's in the screen. Yeah, I guess that would all be that. So I tried to test, but it's throwing a timer error. Oh, okay. I don't have any direct experience with that. I would Google for Flutter testing tutorial future. That would be the magic words. The best thing about learning how to have high Google foo is you learn the way to select keywords from a question and know that if you're looking for the intersection of pages that have all of those keywords. So you got to specify enough of the keywords, but not too many, because too many will rule out probably your answer. But yeah, that's what I would Google for. Flutter testing future. Probably enough. That's probably just those three. Yeah. And somebody's going to have written a Medium article on it or done a video on it for sure.
Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. So I see chat is also quiet.
Yep.
So if you have any question, please take your chance right now and ask your question. Make sure that you have Q. be for your question.
So go out and find John Delancey and bring him in to the chat.
Oh my god! Oh my goodness! Star Trek nerd. I'm right there with you too.
It's a good kind of
Because
nerd.
you can tell because I knew who you were referencing.
Yeah,
That I
exactly.
knew. Yeah, you can
Exactly.
totally tell. One thing is, if you're watching this on a replay, don't forget you can ask your questions also on Twitter.
Yes. With what name on Twitter?
Yeah, hide mine because I'm not gonna. There's Flutter community or FlutterCon.
FlutterCon, right? Yes.
And then there's also the Flutter puzzle hack. If your question specifically about those.
Yes. This is it. This is week 4 of the Flutter puzzle hack. So we're going back to normal, as close as we get to normal anyway. We're going back to normal next week with just the normal Flutter hump day Q&A. And so we'll be here for a couple of hours, sort of winging it and maybe having a special guest. I never know. I'll probably be
hopefully Simon and Scott will be able to rejoin us.
Yes. And thank you, virtual Simon and Scott, for coming in and taking over. You do look a little different than I'm normally used to, so that's fine.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Close to.
Yeah. So this was a fun show. I really liked learning a lot about Firebase. That was fun. Now I want to use Firebase for everything. Unfortunately, client has chosen to use Amplify, so I have to kind of deal with all these other things about Amplify for a while.
Yeah. And I want to say, go ahead. Sorry. I thought you were done. Go ahead. Finish.
Well, I'm never done. I'm never done. Okay. I just keep adding.
So, again, thank you, Puff, for coming and presenting today. It was very informative. Definitely going to go back and watch it, and your Flutter Vikings presentation. So learned a lot.
That's very good.
Get it to sink in. Yeah. Yes.
So let me just show 3 links quickly for those who are watching and they probably missed links. First of all, Firebase documentation. You can find it on this link right now and read more about it. And Flutter hack devpost.com. So this is the place that you should go, finding a lot of information about Flutter hack, as well as the prizes. Prizes are, I think it's around $50,000, isn't it?
There's
something like that.
There's some pretty fancy prizes. I don't have my sights on those, given I haven't started yet. There would have to be a miracle.
$50,000. That'd be like 3 Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. So there is one more repo one more thing that I want to show you here is this sample slide puzzle, where you can find it actually on this address that I'm showing right now. So make sure that you're checking that as well. And as Steph and Randall mentioned, if you have any specific question on Twitter and you want us to take a look at that, or like Flutter puzzle hack, so just use the hashtag and hopefully someone will reply to you on social media.
Right.
And I guess with that said, anything else, Randall or Steph, or should we just say goodbye?
No, this has been great. It'd be nice to be behind the scenes, but also get my face out there and my voice out a little bit. And I appreciate the people that thought my discussion of architecture was really apropos. So that was good.
Yes, very good.
Yep.
All right, then. Thank you, everyone, again for joining us.
See you next week.
And we'll see you next week for sure.
Yep. Push the button, Frank.